Well, if you have that passage open, we're going to be looking at Joshua chapter 10 from verse 16 to the end. Let me ask you a question. Are you encouraged? Are you encouraged in your Christian life? Very often in the evenings when we come to Old Testament passages, I do like to talk about encouragements because it is a massive, massive issue for Christians and churches. 2 Thessalonians 2, Paul describes God as the God of all encouragements. May he encourage your hearts. Often when we have holiday makers come to church, they ask me after a little while of getting to know the church, they say, are you encouraged here? By meaning, are things going well? Are nice things happening? Are you seeing fruits? Are your clubs, the work of your church is progressing? Are you encouraged? And sometimes I ask other people, are you encouraged? Are you encouraged? The problem is that when we think about encouragement in things that happen, things that are happening, people coming, people interested in the gospel, that is really encouraging. The problem is when we think of encouragement just in those terms, when those things aren't happening, what do we say? Are you encouraged? No, I'm not. How do we encourage ourselves as Christians? How do we encourage each other? And by encourage, I don't mean just slightly happy. It's a huge word. To put courage in somebody and resolve and strength and hope. How do you do that? We had a church member a few years ago now who would cut out cheeky articles from the Daily Mail and hand them to me with a smile on his face. And one particular one, there'd been a crash at an airfields show. And it said, the article said, the pilot hadn't been trained at how to pull out of a nosedive. And he said with a smile on his face, I wonder if we know how to pull out of nosedives. And when you feel the nosedive in your Christian life and discouragement, how do we encourage ourselves? How do we pull out of the nosedive? I mean, obviously that's a broader topic than just this passage. We've got to know ourselves as human beings. We're created people with spirit and body. Both are linked in our circumstances. For me, when I'm knowing discouragement, am I eating? Am I sleeping? Am I resting? Those things are huge. The Bible is full of encouragement for God's people. And here we have the occupation of southern Canaan. And we have Joshua coming. And we've got this strange encouragement. Has anybody ever said to you, oh, how are you? Encouraged in church? Yes, we're really encouraged. Our church leader Joshua got the 5 kings and we put our feet on their necks. How's that for a church meeting, encouraging church meeting? A strange encouragement we have here. But this is an encouragement for God's people in their battle against God's enemies and their occupation of the promised land. I want to bring you 4 things. Not everything about encouragement, but 4 things. The first thing I want to say, and it is to do with this rather curious episodes where these 5 kings, the 5 kings have hidden in the cave. Rocks have been rolled up to the mouth of this cave. They don't stop there. They pursue their enemies until they're defeated. Joshua and the Israelites return. And Joshua says, open the mouth of the cave, bring those 5 kings out. And the commanders of the army, Joshua gets them to put their feet on their necks. This is what I want to say here. Encouragement in the Bible is future orientated. It looks ahead. Encouragement is full of hope. Whatever God has done in the past is to encourage our hope for the future. Romans 8. He who did not spare his own son, past, how will he not along with us graciously give us all things? Future. Encouragement is looking forward to what God will do. The Lord has won a decisive victory over 5 kings in southern Canaan at Beth Horon. It is the Lord who has fought for Israel. And now, as a pledge of all that will happen in the future, if you like a sneak preview, they get, if you like, it's almost like a sign, a sacrament. They put their feet on the necks of their enemies as a pledge and a promise in the future of a decisive victory over God's enemies and a giving of the land. It's like a sneak preview. The Lord, and this is not a sign that you'll get in the New Testament for the church. It is a very earthy, a very tangible sign of victory for soldiers. The feet on the necks of their enemy. Now, interestingly, in Scripture, more than interestingly, the first mention of somebody having their feet crushing their enemy is the Messiah. Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman, you shall bruise his heel, but he shall crush your head under your feet. That picture of an enemy being crushed under the feet is a picture of subjugation, of total victory. Psalm 110, the Lord says to his king, his Messiah, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Beneath his feet, the feet of the coming king. And Paul picks up on this in 1 Corinthians 15. He must reign, Jesus must reign until all enemies lie under his feet. There is a future aspect to the victory of Christ, decisive victory on the cross, the glorious resurrection. Jesus reigns until one day sin and death and hell, all the isms that stand against God's, whatever ism it is, all the enemies of God's people will lie crushed under his feet. It's a decisive, total victory, an encouragement that is future orientated. And very often my problem, just thinking on this, is that I'm encouraged by this happening, I'm encouraged by that happening. I try to keep encouragements, but when things are difficult, the Bible would point us to the decisive victory of Christ. Everything that stands against you as a Christian, Satan, death, hell, will be absolutely conquered. There is not an enemy on the field against your soul that will not be decisively defeated. Hal Harris preached a sermon in a place near Bilf Wells, and he said this: I showed them how Christ was the first and the last, that he was first on the field of victory and he'll be the last on the battlefields, that he'll be last after death, last under hell, last under every enemy. And then Hal Harris recorded in his journal, and everyone was much encouraged. And it is encouraging, the decisive victory of Jesus, which is why Paul can write to a church in Rome, Romans chapter 16, and he says this: the God of all peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. Under your feet. Encouragement is future orientated. Second thing, encouragement is infectious. Encouragement is infectious. Look at verse 25. There they are with their feet on the necks of their enemies. And Joshua says, do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight. Now, just think about this. Just think about this. How many times have we heard the Lord saying to Joshua in the book of Joshua, do not be afraid. Be strong and courageous. We've heard it again and again. We've definitely heard it in chapter 1. We've definitely heard it in chapter 8 as they fight after the sin of Achan. So here we have Joshua repeating the encouragement he's received from God to the commanders of his army. Encouragement is so future orientated, it's to be infectious. The encouragement that we receive from the Lord, from his word, we're to pass it on to others. And Paul says this, doesn't he, to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our sorrows so that we might comfort others. I just wonder if you and I are good at passing it on. I'm very bad. Sometimes somebody will say to Rach, "Oh, didn't you know about such and such?" I did tell Pete. And she will say, "Yes, you probably did." Because there's things I'm not passing on. And we look at each other and we come across each other and we've had a hard week or a good week. You've got a Christian family in your life. You've got friends who are Christians. And you think, wait there. There's stuff that the Lord has said to me. Encouragement in difficult circumstance. Do I pass that on? Encouragement is to be infectious. We're to pass on the encouragement we've received from the Lord. Now, here is something. Encouragement is to be inspirational. And this is just a broad point. Because look, from verse 29 to the end of 43, we get the southern cities in Canaan, and it's the account of them being conquered and occupied. Now, a summary sentence would be 41 to 42. Particularly 42, all these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Now, if you read it, on the face of it, it looks like absolute annihilation. Everybody destroyed. But when you come later to the book of Judges, you find that there are many of these same citizens still living in these areas. And you find that later in Joshua as well. How do you put that together? Well, at this kind of point, I consult somebody who knows Hebrew, and his name is Dale Ralph Davis, and he's written a great commentary on these books. We're to see that this language, we do have a decisive victory. Sometimes the Bible uses huge language, overemphasis. We're a decisive victory, just as when it says in Mark that all Judea went out to John the Baptist. A huge amount of people. We're not to think like every granny, absolutely everybody, huge amounts. So here we have a huge victory, still some people remaining, because we see that later in Joshua and Judges. The Lord conquered in one campaign, literally once. This was a once thing, an occupation, but it would later need continuing and sorting out. A bit like when the Germans occupied France, they moved in, and there's a decisive upper hand that they have, but there's still many battles to be fought to decisively secure the lands. Here we have a one-time occupation that is by the Lord's strength. And it is hugely encouraging. They did as the Lord commanded, verse 40, just as the Lord of Israel had commanded. But the point of this huge breaking of the spine of Canaanite resistance is that in reading it, God's people would go on to continue occupy the lands. Because you find in the latter stages of the book of Joshua, there's still land to be occupied. There's still enemies to be fought. So the encouragement that God gives us, here's the point I want to make, is to inspire obedience. Is to inspire us to go on with God, to keep going. It's not like, oh, I'm really encouraged, lovely. Just, there we go, that's nice. Encouragement is like, press on, keep going. The work that we do as Christians, in the local church, of witnessing, of gathering together, of seeking to know God's will, of seeking to reach out the gospel. We see encouragements. Great. Crack on. Keep going with the work of the gospel. Encouragement is future orientated. It's infectious. It's inspirational. Encouragement is in the Lord's. Just in this chapter, do you see again and again, this battle is incredible, this decisive victory, this occupation of the lands. How is it possible? It is all God's gift. Verse 14 of chapter 10, the Lord fought for Israel. Verse 19, the Lord has given them into your hand. Verse 25, this is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight. Verse 30, the Lord gave them into that city and its king into the hand. Verse 32, the Lord handed Lachish over. Verse 42, the Lord fought for Israel. Encouragement can be found in many, many ways in the Christian life. The Lord encourages us in all kinds of ways. Our ultimate encouragement is in God himself. He is for us on our own. We are nothing. We cannot do it with our glorious God. All that we do is his gift. Any success in ministry and in life goes to him. Even in difficulty, he is for us. Our hope is in the Lord himself. Which is why, are you encouraged when we say that as Christians? We need to be thinking whether the glass is half empty or half full, or whether the glass is just completely smashed. The Lord is in the picture. It is God himself who is for us. Ephesians chapter 6, Paul says, be strong in the Lord's and in the strength of his might. It's God himself who is for us. If thou art my shield and my son, the night is as nothing to me, and fast as my moments roll on, they bring me but nearer to thee. That's a sovereign protector I have. 606. We're going to sing it together.